This is Julia with iCadenza, and I'm here with Sheri Greenawald, who is the director of the San Francisco Opera Center and also the artistic director of the Marola program at San Francisco Opera. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you very much.
You just conducted a wonderful masterclass at Marlborough School in Los Angeles where you shared the fruits of your wisdom with the students here, and that was so wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I really think that teaching is a wonderful thing to be able to do at the end of a career when I sang for 30 years, but to be able to teach is just a joy, at your end of your life. I can do this for the rest of my life. In fact, my own voice teacher dropped dead in the middle of a lesson. So,
Wow.
I figured that'll be me too. I'm always thinking I'm channeling Audrey Langford from somewhere because she had a bum left knee and so do I. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, you had an incredible career before going into teaching.
Yes.
Were there any turning points in your career? Were there any roles that you sang that you found to really change your mindset about what you were doing?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the most important things was when I did meet Audrey Langford, my teacher, who was a teacher who taught. She would say to me, "I can tell you so much, then you go read Grey's Anatomy." And I do own my own Grey's Anatomy, and it sits in my house, and it's full of papers and all kinds of notes and all kinds of things. But she taught from a very mechanical standpoint, and that was so helpful to me because before that, you've had the teacher who bite an apple, and I want to say, well, how large and what color, and it's like, oh, clarify that image for me because I guess I had too much. My parents were both science teachers. I think I had too much science in me. So I wanted more clear, objective concepts. And Audrey finally was able to give me that. And I found her when I was 29 years old, and I think that was what enabled me to sing into my 50s. That was like really critical. And I think doing certain roles sort of reveal you to the world in a funny way. I think singers get lucky when they get that role that sort of just taps into who they are or what your own sensitivities are. And I think probably the Violetta that I did, it was my first Violetta too, in Opera Theater of St. Louis way back when. I don't even know the year at all. But I think that sort of catapulted me a little beyond sort of where the soubrette always was, because I was a like most young sopranos, I was a lyric coloratura when I started, and you start out singing the soubrette roles. You sing the Despinas, the Zerlinas, all the Inas and Ettas, we say. You sing a lot of Ina and a lot of Etta. And so finally of course Violetta has an Etta in it too, but you finally get to a role like that, and it sort of takes you out of that young singer mold and pushes you toward something more important in the business. And I think that was one of the big turning points. And I was very lucky to have really close relationships with certain houses. I think that's what a singer often does, is you establish a relationship with an intendant or a music director, and they really can help guide your career. And some of the people who have been incredibly important for me have been Stephen Lord, who is actually the music director now. He wasn't when I was there, but he's the music director of Opera Theater of St. Louis, and he's conducting around all over the world. And he was such a great musician and was my coach who taught me the Violetta, in fact. And he had a huge influence on me and then Edo de Waart, conductor, he looked at my score one day, we were working, and he said, "Why are you counting these things like this?" Because a singer is an idiot, and when we see a rest, then we count from the rest to the next note. And Edo said, "That's so awful." He said, "That's instead of, like La 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something." He'd say, "You've got to go La 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, go," And so he just sort of made me really focus on studying that page and really learning music in a way that it would stay in you, And so that, I think, also is something very critical, is learning how to see the music on the page. It's all fine and well that you can pick it up and make it sort of happen, but you should be able to look at that score and understand it on the page. And I really encourage that. And there are certain composers, for instance, that are, if you just do what they tell you to do in that score, you have a performance already. And Puccini is very much that way, and Massenet, the French composer, is completely that way. So I think that's really an important lesson also, is just to become a better musician yourself, always. And languages, as we may have spoken earlier about languages, and studying languages is important. And like I said, I was lucky to be in New York dealing with a bunch of diplomats who always spoke French, and being at parties with all these French speakers. So I got very comfortable speaking French, which helped because I lived in France then for 11 years, so that was nice. But languages are so critical too. And I really encourage kids to study it not only on the page, but just study it orally. Go to a teacher that will just speak to you the whole time so that your ear becomes attuned. Because musicians do have good ears, and if you then hear it repeated correctly over and over and over again, it'll worm its way in there eventually, you know.
Or you would hope.
You hope, anyway. Yes.
It's so difficult these days to pursue a career, and there's so much more that needs to be in place besides your technique. What do you recommend that singers and musicians in general, but singers particularly, do to put themselves in a better position of succeeding in the career? Because you hear so many singers in auditions, and you were mentioning during the master class that, you know, sometimes you just have an aha moment, you just hear that singer that is a hidden gem and is so wonderful. But how do you know that they have the other characteristics that you need to succeed?
Well, you don't always know initially. The thing you first respond to probably is either the great voice, a great actor, or a great musician. Those sort of, when you find those all three in one, that's the big bonus, right? That's when it really comes together. Yeah, I certainly think at the level that I am producing, where I, you know, I'm in charge of a program that's one of the best in the country, I'm really looking for quality instruments, sort of first and foremost. That's really what I'm looking for. Technical issues, small technical, not great technical issues, of course. I mean, they won't make it to the program probably if there are big technical issues. But if there are small technical issues with a voice that's really astounding, I'm willing to take that chance because I have a wonderful helpmate taking care of my singers, Cesar Ulloa, who has also worked with the Thornton singers here in Los Angeles a great deal. He's a wonderful teacher, and he and I, you know, we take care of them, and Cesar is a great help with me to look after the kids. So that's, I forget where we were coming from with that, but that's...
Well, what do you recommend that singers do to put themselves, besides technical work, of course, that's so important, but once they've sort of, you never fully master it, of course, but once they've mastered it enough to pursue the career,
yes.
What other steps do you think they should be taking?
Well, I think you have a great program that originated here in Los Angeles with Ann Baltz, who does opera works. I think Ann's kind of a program where they do a lot of improv and all this kind of thing, where a student can really get in and sort of suddenly actually feel themselves as the character, not trying to portray it, but to actually feel themselves as the character. And I think Ann, that kind of work, I think taking improv classes, some kind of acting classes. I have this thing about acting, though, with singers, because an actor has freedom. You have the speech, you have to stay to the words, of course, but you have freedom of tempo, freedom to pause where you want. You know, you can whisper if you want, you know, and all this. And you can stay up late and drink and smoke when you're an actor, you know. As a singer, you can't.
Can't do anything as a singer.
Can't do anything. It's the nun's life for us. But yeah, I think I find that the acting technique that I actually use more often with my kids is sort of the outward in version, that you find that if you hold the cane in a certain way, it gives you a certain feeling, because almost more the English, you know. It's like the famous story of Dustin Hoffman and Olivier, you know, filming Marathon Man, and Dustin Hoffman had stayed out all night to feel tired and miserable and had grown his beard out for days and showed up on the set, and Olivier looked at him and said, "My boy, what's happened to you?" And he said, "Well, I'm getting into character." And Olivier looked at him and just said, "Well, why don't you just act?" That's one of my favorite stories. So, you know, I think, because for a singer, your timing is not your own. You can't stop where you want to. It's like everything is on that page, as I was saying. It's like coming home to that page. So you can't, I don't think method acting works completely as a singer because there are too many elements you're dealing with. Because you're also on the tightrope. Because a singer singing high notes in that, it's the equivalent of the person going on the tightrope. And so, you know, you can't cry, Stella, on the tightrope, you know, it's just not going to happen. So, yeah, I think, you know, taking acting classes, but classes that are really sort of designed to help a singer come through the medium itself. And that's difficult, and I think it's difficult to find those. I do like improv classes for kids. I think that's very important, because heaven knows things happen on stage. You better be able to improv. So, you know, that's a good thing.